Everyone goes through grief and loss. Whether you are someone who has unfortunately been plagued by it pretty much since birth, or you've come this far without having to deal with it, eventually your day will come. It comes for all of us. At some point in your life, you will experience some kind of grief or some kind of sense of loss, and it is going to change you. Sometimes you lose a person and it's difficult, it's painful at the time, but after a little more time passes, you realize that you're going to be just fine and it isn't anything that really shapes you as a person that much. And that's not to say that you didn't care about that person, it's just that each loss that we experience throughout our lives impacts us in a very unique way. And that is why, for a very long time in my life, I've always tried to tell people who are dealing with grief and loss that everyone present at a funeral is going to experience it in their own way. You might be very shocked to see who is impacted the most. You might be shocked by who just seems quiet. And what I think we all tend to forget in our own moment of grief is that not everyone displays grief the same way. Take, for instance, my uncle. My uncle lost his mom when he was, I believe, like mid-teens, maybe 14, 15 years old, and he has Asperger's. So he apparently, according to my mother, got really nagged on at the funeral and after the funeral because the relatives in attendance couldn't understand why in the world he had just watched his mother go through a horrible health condition and die, and he wasn't crying. How can you not care that your mother is laying there in a casket right now? And what they failed to realize was that he did care a lot, and he was internalizing a lot, and his way of dealing with the grief that he was feeling in that moment was to take care of his two younger siblings and then to retreat back in his home in his father's house in the basement and watch a bunch of Star Trek to get it out of his system, watch sad episodes or something that would kind of pull it out of him, because he was a solitary griever. Him not shedding tears in front of others didn't mean that he didn't care, and it didn't even mean that he wasn't appropriately responding in any way. It simply meant that he was grieving differently in a way that made sense to him. And ever since, he's done his very best to take her very best traits and apply them to his own life and his own child so that she can have the best possible relationship with him. I recently suffered a loss. My entire family did. And while I don't feel it's necessary to go into a lot of specific detail on it, it's something that was simultaneously kind of a long time coming and also very sudden. For technically decades, we knew this person was chronically ill and that they were suffering very badly. But year after year, it would seem like they were gonna pass, and then they didn't. And they would go into hospice and then come out of hospice. And it was just this whole thing back and forth of okay, well, it's sad seeing them like this because this is a very good person. But you got to a point where it was almost like this person can't die. We'd almost lost them and had them bounce back so many times that death almost felt foreign when it was applied to this person. It was okay, obviously we don't literally think this person could not pass on, but subconsciously your brain keeps on seeing that like nothing seems to take this person out, so maybe nothing ever will. And then they were doing a little bit better, like physically they still need assistance with everything, they couldn't really do anything on their own, but mentally they were doing great. They were having conversations with people, they were joking around with their usual sense of humor and everything, and everything in that regard seemed fine. But then, like, literally in the middle of a visit with one of this person's sons, they just started kind of, drifting away, just kind of staring off into space and not really responding to anything. So this person waited for someone else to come over and visit, and they experienced the same thing. This person bounced back like they generally did, and then mid-conversation, they just floated off again. And within like an hour of that, they were taken away in an ambulance. They were taken to the emergency room. They tried to do tests to find out whether or not this was a stroke. This person was basically moved pretty much immediately from the ER bed into the hospice bed because they were like, listen, like, can't really do anything for them. This is basically it. And this person's partner and son had to sign a do not resuscitate form that was like, take this person to hospice. I don't know if they're going to be around a day, a couple days, whatever, but let them have some peace and quiet and just see the people that they love. And hopefully they'll just pass peacefully, which is ultimately what ended up happening. It was like 4:30 in the morning. Oddly, everyone who was really close to this person woke up at the exact point that they were pronounced dead, which was interesting. And we all saw that almost as, oh, they made their rounds to say goodbye to everybody. And the reason that I'm discussing all this is because I have suffered a lot of grief and loss in my lifetime, more than pretty much all of my friends. And this one was different. This was one that hit me differently. And it's almost like simultaneously been the worst and most painful and difficult thing that I've ever had to go through, and the best thing I've ever had to go through. And I don't think it's wrong to admit to things like that. And that's like the main topic of conversation that I want to bring up in this video tonight, is that the first few days were just like, it was just not sinking in completely. Even after the funeral, it was just not fully sinking in that this person was gone, because I was being really busy with family and stuff, making sure they were okay, consoling everyone else, and, being strong. And we'll come back to that phrase in a minute. And I was so go at the time that I didn't really have a chance for it to sink in. And then I got back to my house and my usual everyday life, and basically for a living I just make art. I make art for a living, and I do YouTube for fun because I enjoy it. And I'm glad that if my videos can ever help even one person out there, then I think they're worth putting the time and effort into. And unfortunately, although I generally enjoy those things, you have a lot of time to just sit there and think when you're just editing a video or planning it, or when you're just drawing a picture or coloring something or writing something. It's just kind of non-stop thinking time. And that's when it started to really sink in. And I'm gonna admit right now, there were 2 days where I wasn't even necessarily thinking about this person, like really sitting down and like thinking of them as a person, but I just couldn't stop crying for 2 days straight until I fell asleep those nights. I was just inconsolable. People were trying to talk to me about just normal stuff, talk to me about my cats, talk to me about, paganism, talk to me about anything that would generally make me happy, and nothing was working. Even while I was trying to actively have these conversations and talk to people normally, I was crying while talking to them, and I was just like, I am losing my mind. What is going on? Why am I being like this? Like, this wasn't a complete shock or anything. I kind of knew this was coming, inevitably. Who isn't gonna die eventually? And I was like, and I've come face to face with death so many times. Like, this isn't something that should be getting to me as badly as it is. And I just spent like pretty much the last full week reacting like that, having, on and off cry sessions during the day, trying to just get through the day and beating myself up a lot, mentally every time I thought I was doing fine, and I just started randomly crying for, in my mind at that. And then today I hit this kind of interesting epiphany moment. Technically, I started getting some glimmers of it yesterday, but it really came full circle today. And it's because I realized that with my new drawing tablet, I get work done better when I am upstairs in my bedroom alone, which is where I am right now. I have more workspace, I have more privacy and quiet where I can focus, and I was just zooming through pages today, so I was very productive, and I was like, okay, this is good, I'm going to continue doing this then. And while I was just sitting here working and working, getting things done that I enjoyed, I didn't cry once the entire day. And I sat there and I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, what's different about today? It's still only been a week or so. Not that much time has passed, especially considering last night I was crying right before I went to sleep. So I was like, what happened today that is so different than all those other days leading up to now? What changed? Why am I not reacting the same way I did before? And the reason is because I finally sat down and I was looking at pictures of this person. I was thinking about all the things about them that make me happy, all the things I learned from them, all the ways I want to embody who they were and continue who they were. I don't want this person's good qualities to die with them. I want them to continue on. And I was thinking of all these really positive things, and that's when it hit me. Positivity, strength. Positivity and strength are some of the most toxic words I have ever encountered in my life when it comes to grief and loss. Ever since I can remember, every time I have suffered a loss of a human, an animal, anything that meant a lot to me, the first thing that I was told by people in my life, it was, so-and-so has passed away. And the second my eyes welled up, the second my smile faded, the second I looked like I was going to display any level of pain, I was immediately ripped out of it by an adult or some kind of authority figure in my life saying, but they're in a better place now. But you need to be strong because so-and-so is closer to them than you are, and they need you to be there for them. And later on, when a little more time passes and you can kind of drop a little bit of that strength that you're displaying for whoever else needs you at the time, the second again, it's like, okay, time to finally let that grief come swinging. It's, oh, but they wouldn't want you to remember them this way. They wouldn't want you to be sad about their passing. They'd want you to think of all of the happy times. Be positive. Think of the fact that they're not suffering anymore. Think of the fact that they had all these good moments in their life and cherish those. And I understand where people are coming from. I understand what they're trying to do when they say these things. But I realized today that these forced moments of strength and forced moments of positivity that have been thrust upon me literally every time I've suffered a loss have caused me to become someone who is just rife with toxic positivity. And toxic positivity can severely damage a person, especially when it comes to things like what just happened to my family. It's okay if you're having a hard time. It's okay if you have days or weeks or months where you're not doing well because you miss somebody. And it's difficult because people who, at least for me, have approached grief by telling me to either be positive or to be strong are doing it from a religious background. These are usually people who are Christian, and that's not a dig at Christians. This is not going to become a, screw all the Christians festival. It's just an observation and a fact for me that all the people who do this happen to be Christian, and it is because they're just like, well, I'm sad for a second saying goodbye, but like, it's not forever. It's fine because when I die, I'm gonna basically just go to sleep one day, and when I wake up, I'll be in heaven, and I'm gonna be surrounded by all these people that I missed, and everything will be just fine. And sometimes I truly envy these people. Sometimes I wish that I could just tell myself something like that and be fine with the fact that I'm missing someone, but the fact of the matter is, I have always been someone who has a nearly compulsive need to ask questions and to have those questions answered. Anyone in my family would tell you I've always been a really curious person. Even when I was only a year old, my grandmother was babysitting me while my parents had a little date night before my sister was born. And my mother told me a story about how when she came to pick me up, my grandma was like white as a sheet, just staring, like shocked. And she was like, "What's the matter?" And she said, "The entire time you were gone, all this kid did was sit here studying one of those stupid little plastic rings. I tried to go, no, here, you put it over the little, pole thing, or like you can play with your blocks, you can play with this or that. Nope. First thing that I apparently picked up that night was that one little plastic ring, and I just needed to study every aspect of it and know exactly what was going on. That I was also told that if I didn't feel I was learning to crawl or walk or whatever fast enough, I would get really angry about it and understand why I couldn't do that thing. And as I got older and I learned to read, I was constantly found in the library because if I had a question, I would just go consult the encyclopedia. Nowadays, I do that with the internet. I have a question, I want to immediately know the answer. And I don't think that for the most part there's anything wrong with that, but it can create some roadblocks, such as with what is happening right now in my life, because around the time I was about 16 or so, I was still a minor, still had to live under my parents' rules, and my mother still had me going to a Catholic church every Sunday and had me studying religious education and stuff, and was deciding that I was gonna have to do what's it called, confirmation and stuff, where you're basically promising your soul, mind, heart, everything away to this religion for the rest of your life. Like an 8th grader has the wherewithal to make that kind of decision. And around that time, I was starting to hang out with people from a public school. A little bit before, I was 16, although I'd been in a Catholic school for a long time, my parents could no longer afford that luxury and had no choice but to send me to public school. And although they had me in a religious ed course, I was still hanging out with just whoever was nice to me. And I had friends who were pagans. I had a friend who was a Satanist. I had a friend who was an atheist. And my curiosity, instead of forcing me to do what the rest of my family does, which is close themselves up and be like, I'm just not going to associate with those people because something's wrong with them, I wanted to know, Why aren't you Catholic? Why aren't you Christian? Why are you a Satanist? What is it about atheism that spoke to you more than religion? And as I would listen to these people and truly consider all of the information that they were giving me, I started realizing that a lot of what I'd been taught throughout my life didn't make any sense, and that for the first time, my questions were actually being answered by someone. And this is why, like, I don't think there's a problem with religion. I'm not going to be one of these people who's just like, if you're religious in any capacity, you're an idiot, because I think that to a certain degree, religion can really help people cope with a lot. It just should not be the be-all, end-all of your entire existence, in my opinion. And after finally having questions actually answered by a lot of these friends and stuff, and learning a little bit more about different views of the world through the minds and hearts of different people, I started realizing what was going to work better for me. And that's when I started looking more into like paganism and old school religions like that. And I started kind of pairing my spiritual life with science, because I'm not someone who thinks like, oh, don't believe in science, like everything is a plant or something by a deity. Not at all. Not at all. I think science is extremely important. I think everyone should keep an open mind to science, because we couldn't have progressed as a species without it. Science has given us a lot of great gifts, and we should definitely continue on that path. But where things can get really hard when it comes to things like grief and this toxic positivity that I'm being surrounded with right now, or this, forced strength that I was mentioning before, is the fact that although I have had a lot of experiences throughout my lifetime that lead me to believe something happens after we die, because I've had too many people tell me stories, and I've experienced too many things myself involving, some kind of, I guess, if you want to call it, supernatural experience, when I wasn't focused on that. I wasn't even kind of considering it. It was just like a normal day, normal activities, and something just kind of happened out of nowhere. I've had too many experiences like that to think that there is nothing. But that being said, although I may have, some idea that maybe something happens after we die, I am not arrogant enough to believe I know what that is. I'm not arrogant enough to sit here and say, well, because some of the religions I've studied said this, and that kind of goes along with what I'd like to happen, that just is absolutely what's going to happen. I'm not someone who can just easily sit here and convince myself that I know what lies beyond, and that's terrifying to me sometimes. There are days where I make jokes about, like, death is an old friend of mine. We have tea every Tuesday and stuff, which is where my channel banner came from, because I've almost died a little handful of times, or I've had out-of-body experiences when I wasn't doing too well, health-wise or something. And then I have other days where I wake up in the middle of the night in a panic attack or something, because the idea that I had gotten close to it is scary as hell. And I don't think anything's wrong with either of those. I think it's fine to embrace death and accept the fact that it's going to happen to us one day, and be at peace with that fact. And I also think it's okay to have moments where it's really, really scary, because none of us knows exactly what it will feel like, and none of us knows exactly what's going to happen afterwards. Is it just lights out, like we never existed? Like, our brains can't comprehend what nothingness is. What is nothing? It isn't this tangible thing we can understand, so it's scary. And that whole, it's normal to be a little bit scared of not knowing what's going to happen to you, is where this strength thing kind of bothers me. It bothers me because, one, you can't force strength on someone. Two, your idea of strength isn't necessarily what someone else's is. I think it's strange that with the loss of this person who just passed very recently, I've been being told by countless people, family, friends, everybody, every time I look remotely sad, that, they're strong because they haven't cried about it or something, or like, oh no, they're fine, they're gonna be fine. It's not, it's not a big deal. Like, it's all good. I'll see that person again someday, or I'm glad they're not suffering anymore. And I'm like, that's all well and good, but like, for me, this isn't necessarily something that, you have to believe for yourself, but for me personally, I think it's much stronger to let yourself have those moments where you break down, to let yourself have those moments where you say, I miss that person. I'm having a crappy day today, and they're who I would have called, and they would have had this great advice from me. Or I just had something amazing happen, and I want to tell them all about it, but they're not here to talk to, and that sucks, and I wish they were here, and I'd do anything to get them back. I think it's strong to let yourself have those moments. I think it's strong to admit when you're scared. I think it's strong to say, I'm sad right now. I'm happy they're not struggling. I'm happy that they're not, going through all of the torment they were going through when they were alive. But also, I'm sad. I want them back. I'm not okay right now. I think it's strong to let yourself feel whatever you need to feel. I think that human beings, we have this weird conditioning we've kind of done to ourselves. Like, other people, external forces have done it to us, but we've done it to ourselves too, where we're just like, it's totally fine if someone's running around all day smiling and laughing and making other people smile and laugh and just generally being happy. But the second that person is crying or expressing anger, that's not okay. You can smile the day away, but if you frown, think about it. All of us have been through it before where like, you're not upset or anything. You're not feeling any kind of negative emotion. You're just resting. You're literally just sitting there, chilled out. But because you're not smiling like a clown, someone approaches you and is like, what's wrong? And you're like, nothing is wrong. What are you talking about? And they're just like, fine, don't tell me then, but I'm gonna sit here until you tell me what's wrong. And you're like, literally nothing's wrong. What do you want me to tell you right now? Like, I'm honestly fine. And they convince themselves something must be wrong because you're not smiling that second, even though if they really thought about it, it'd be a weird reason for you to smile if you're just like sitting there eating a sandwich or something. You're just sitting there watching TV or staring at a wall or something. Like, why do you have to be happy 24/7? That's toxic. Even in Buddhist philosophy, they teach the importance of allowing yourself to have moments where you're sad or you're angry, because you can't fully appreciate the joyful moments and living in the present moment if you haven't allowed yourself to feel everything. As long as a singular emotion doesn't consume your entire existence, there's nothing wrong with feeling what you need to feel. And that's something that I think that more people need to think about more actively. The fact that right now, the most obscure thing while I'm filming this video could make me a little angry, and I should be able to just, swear and stomp my foot for a second, take a deep breath, and then be fine. Or, I could be talking about the person I've been talking about that I've lost, and there might come a moment in the video where it makes me want to cry because I miss that person. I almost have twice now. I just ended up not needing to. But if I need to at some point in the video, I'm gonna let myself, and that's okay. And after I have that moment where I cry, I'll be fine afterward. And I don't know, I think the saddest thing about this weird conditioning of like toxic positivity and the toxicity of those words, strength and positivity, when someone has died and someone misses them, it's making things harder in the long run. It's making it so I am kind of forced to grieve longer, and other people in this position are forced to grieve longer and to internalize everything. And what happens when things are just internalized and they keep piling up and piling up and boiling and boiling and boiling, and they have nowhere to go? Eventually they explode. So by not allowing people to feel the way they need to feel, you're effectively causing them to internalize all that negativity until one day it comes out in a way that harms the people around them. And that's wrong. That's not something that should be encouraged. Like, I understand that your individual faith may cause you to believe something, and it might be really odd to that not everyone believes that same thing that you do. But even if you think that there's a lot of positivity in not just death, any kind of grief or loss, or you think that, there's a bright side to it, that's fine. But one, make sure you're actually letting yourself feel everything you need to feel, and you're not just convincing yourself that everything is fine. And two, understand that not everyone is going to feel the same way you do. So if you see someone who looks like they're getting angry, or they look like they need to cry over, losing somebody, give them that. Let them have that moment. Let them feel like they can be vulnerable around you. And if they say, I'm scared because I don't know where this person went, or I miss them, or I don't know how to carry on without them, don't be sitting there telling them like, oh, everything's fine though because they're not suffering. Like, yeah, that is good for them, but don't just tell them anything that's religiously motivated, because that's not necessarily helping the person who's grieving. If you sit here and tell someone like me or an atheist or anybody else who doesn't have like a heaven and a hell type afterlife in what they believe, that everything's fine because you'll see them again one day, like, it kind of hurts, honestly, sometimes hearing that and being told because you think that you're going to see them again one day, everyone else should just automatically be fine right now. Like, that's just not how the world necessarily works. I mean, frankly, none of us of any background knows exactly what's going to happen. We could all be dead wrong for all we know, because none of us have fully been there and come back to talk about it. And I wanted to turn the camera on to talk about it because I'm hoping that this helps somebody in some way out there that's going through something similar to what I am, and is realizing that sometimes this chin up type of attitude through grief and loss is really hurtful. And I've seen people who decades and decades after they've lost someone, because they forced that positive attitude or that show of strength throughout everything they went through, they're damaged people now. They are hurting themselves. They hurt the people around them really badly because they have never dealt with it correctly. And I think that we could put an end to a lot of long-term pain and suffering if we just allowed each other to have those moments that everyone perceives as weakness but are actually the greatest strength. The moments when we can admit we need help and that we need someone to stand by us. And I think that I've changed a lot. This loss has changed me as a person more than any other loss in my entire life ever has. And going forward, I don't think I'm ever going to be the same person again. And that might sound kind of sad, but actually I think that there's something kind of beautiful in that. It's a metamorphosis of sorts, that this person meant so much to me that I spent like an entire week just about fully grieving them and being in almost constant pain over their loss. And now I just feel like I have this fully new outlook on life. And I'm sure that anyone who follows me on social media has noticed the change as well, because I haven't been on Facebook for a while, like a month or two now. I haven't posted much on Instagram except just letting people know I'm alive since I was in the hospital recently. I was actually in the hospital right before this person passed away. And I'll talk about that in another video. But that's pretty much all I've posted there. And Twitter, I haven't really done much of anything on. And if you followed me on Twitter before now, you'd know that I was posting several times a day on there. And just the things that were so important to me every day, the things that I just had to do. And again, it was almost like a compulsion. It was this weird thing where like I just had to keep on looking there and doing all these things. And like, I just don't care about those things anymore. I just don't. Like, obviously, yeah, like in terms of activism and stuff and making sure that people treat each other more fairly and that we put an end to things like racism and transphobia and all that disgusting bigotry that exists in the world. Obviously, I still care about that stuff, but my focus is lying now beyond the scope of just social media. I still want to do YouTube. I think that's the platform that I can most easily express what I want to get out to the world, but I would rather put, like I said, my focus and my attention elsewhere, somewhere other than just Twitter and stuff. Like, I haven't even really opened Twitter for the most part for like a week. And it's interesting because although I've, been in pain from a loss, I've been happier overall just living in the present moment. And I think that no matter how much we try to distance ourselves from social media, it's hard to not get hooked back in by, the latest juicy YouTube drama or something, or somebody finding an old tweet of someone that's like, oh no, here's this bad tweet from when they were like 16 years old and stuff, and like everyone just has to run to it. I even tested myself today. I tried to watch like a drama channel or something. I was just like, I just don't care. Like, this doesn't matter to me anymore. Like, none of this stuff matters. I'm literally only making this video right now because I want to, because it's bringing me some kind of peace to put this out into the world right now and to talk about it. I was trying to post on Instagram every day, even if it wasn't like a photo or something, it was a story, or if it wasn't on my own Instagram, it was on the Instagrams that I made for my animals and stuff. And it's like, you think that it's fun and that you're enjoying it at the time because you're getting the instant gratification of those likes, but it turns into kind of a never enough situation after a while. And I'm like, I'm not doing that stuff to myself. Like, that's one of the good things about this whole metamorphosis I was talking about, is the fact that I know what matters to me now. I don't want to just be constantly worried about something that I can't do anything about. I want to feel whatever I need to feel in that present moment. I need to do whatever I want to do in that present moment. And as always, do something that makes you happy today, no matter what anyone else thinks about it. And I will see all of you again soon.